I'm Charity Nebbe. This year, we've seen nation and statewide protests calling for equality and racial justice, a movement led by Black Americans. In Iowa, a predominantly white state, Black voices are often overshadowed. In Talk of Iowa's series, Iowa Week 2020, Listening to Black Voices, I've been talking with Black Iowans about their experiences and their ideas. IPR Classical's Jacqueline Halbloom sat down to talk with Simon Estes. He's a bass baritone who's had a major international career. She talked with him about what it was like to grow up in Iowa.
So give us just a thumbnail sketch, a quick view of growing up in Centerville and what your life was like, your early life was like in Iowa.
Well, as you know, Centerville was, and a lot of people don't know that, it was a big Ku Klux Klan town in the 20s. And so some of that obviously went over into when I was born too, because there was, Centerville was no different from Albia or Ottumwa or any other town, but there was racial discrimination there. People of color, we were called colored in those days, always had the menial jobs. They didn't have any decent jobs. Whether it be, even if it was a cashier in Walgreens or something, they couldn't do that at all. My family, we were very, very poor economically speaking, but we were multi-millionaires in our faith in God and the importance of education. And I had 3 older sisters. My father worked in the coal mines because that's why he came to Iowa. And so Centerville was no different, as I said, from any other place. We couldn't swim in the swimming pool with white people. Eventually, they would let us swim on Saturdays from 9 o'clock until 11. And when we got out of the pool, they would put more disinfectant in the water. A number of the restaurants we could not eat in at all. And so that was the background of Centerville. But what I am grateful for in Centerville, in spite of the racial discrimination, they had great schools, I had great teachers, and the people that I admired the most were teachers, ministers, nurses, and doctors. Those are the people that I looked up to in Centerville. E.W. Fannin one time invited me to come over to his house, and I wondered, what in the world have I done that the superintendent, who's above the principals, has invited me over to his house? But it was a positive experience. He said to me, Simon, he said, you're going to be somebody someday. If you keep your nose to the grindstone and work hard, you will be somebody. Obviously, I had no idea what he was talking about, but he saw something in me. And I must say, I feel tremendously blessed and honored because now that I've reached almost 83 years of age, I have learned a little bit and gotten a little wisdom. And what I realize now is God must have put something inside of me that people recognize it. I only had positive input, even though there was discrimination in the schools. They wouldn't let colored students do certain things. And even sports, for example, unless you were not an exceptional somebody like Michael Jordan, you couldn't even be on the starting basketball team. But the people saw something. I had a coach named Bill Jerome, and he really encouraged me in my life, and some of the teachers did too. And I'm saying this not to brag or to boast, but to say it with humility, how important it is that children, when they're growing up, that they get positive input and just not negative input. Because I think all of that helped me to be more secure the older I became.
And you started your singing career quite at a young age by singing in the church choir.
Well, I sang, actually I did solo work in the church, the Second Baptist Church. It was an all-colored school, church. We had 2 Baptist churches in Centerville. The First Baptist Church is where the white people went. The Second Baptist Church is where the colored people went. But my first solo that I sang, I was about 8 years of age. I sang a solo in the Second Baptist Church. But when I was in elementary school, the music teacher, her name was Ellen Clark, she would be the one that would have about an hour and work with us on music. And the students who had the nicer voices, she had sit in front. And so I always got to sit in front. So she recognized a vocal talent that I had that I didn't know I had. And she certainly didn't know that I was going to be an opera singer. But then when I was in junior high school, I was invited to come over and sing in the high school choir because a high school teacher, a music teacher, heard me singing. And so he asked the principal of the junior high school if I could come over and sing in the high school choir, and they said yes. So quite often I think a lot of my life was predestined. Everything was arranged because it seems as though certain events took place that I had no control over, and they were just simply there. And then in high school, there was discrimination. They had competitions every year. And Don Gunderson was a high school choral director. I never did get a first prize. They wouldn't give it. And I remember he was always sad. He would always say, Simon, I'm talking about high school age. He said, you should have gotten first place. I didn't even get second or third place. But he recognized the talent that I had. And then when I went to the University of Iowa, I experienced another form of discrimination. I wanted to sing at one point in the university choir, the big choir. And the choral director was also the head of the vocal department. So I went to him and I said, could I sing in the choir here at the University of Iowa? And he said, no, your voice isn't good enough. I said, well, you're the head of the voice department. I said, could I take voice lessons with you? He said, no, you have no talent. I would not waste my time with you. And he said it really rather rudely like that. He said, however, there's a young teacher coming here this fall. Now that was in like 1958. And he said, maybe he will take you. Well, that was Charles Kellis. And he heard me singing and started to give me voice lessons. He said, Simon, you have a voice to sing opera. And I more or less said to him, what's opera, Mr. Kellis? So he played some recordings of great opera singers for me and a symphonic recording. And after I heard this music, I said to Mr. Kellis, I really like that stuff. I just called it stuff. And so he was the one who worked with me for 2 years at the University of Iowa and arranged the audition at Juilliard School of Music. And I went out to Juilliard School of Music in 1963. And Mr. Kellis came to the University of Iowa in 1961.
You mentioned that when you went to the University of Iowa, that you were the first black singer in the Old Gold Singers. And that was a new thing that happened at the University of Iowa.
Yes, it had been in existence for a short period of time, and Gerald Lawson was the director of the Old Gold Singers, and he heard about my singing. So I sang an audition for him, and he wanted me to sing with the group. It was a group of singers, about 22. So he went to the choir and said, would you mind if Simon Estes sang? They said, well, sure. Can he sing? He said, yes. He said, but he's colored. And my colleagues at the University of Iowa said, well, we don't care that he's colored. They said, can he sing? And you said he could sing? So yes, he can be in the group. So I was the first black person to ever sing in the Old Gold Singers. When I went to the University of Iowa in the mid and late 50s, a black student and a white student, male that is, we couldn't share a room. The rooms had male dormitories, as you know, and female dormitories, but they couldn't share a room together. And when I was working at the Quadrangle dormitory at the University of Iowa, I worked in the kitchen washing pots and pans and vats with some other colors, although we were black at that time. And I went to the lady who was the head of the kitchen, let's say, at the cafeteria rather. Her name was Mary. We always called her Bloody Mary because she was really mean. But I said, why is it that all of the black students, we have to work in the kitchen, scrubbing floors and washing pots and pans? Why can't we serve food or take the student number when they come through? She said, oh, because you always come late. I said, I can't believe all of us came late. I said, I want to see a black student out there. She said, well, if black people would serve, the students wouldn't eat. I said, these students will eat if a dog serves them. They're hungry. They don't care what color it is. She said, oh, well, you want it for yourself. I said, no, I'll stay in the kitchen washing pots and pans, but I want to see a person of color out there. And she was just vehement about not letting that happen. I said, well, I'm a member of the student council. I'm going to bring this up. Well, then she changed her mind. She said, all right, then I'll hire one. And if he makes a mistake, I'll hire one. If he makes a mistake, she said, I will fire him. I said, no. If he's irresponsible, hire another one. Well, unfortunately, the guy she hired he came late. And I said, hire another one. But anyhow, I integrated that. I really did. And from that point on, students could also stand in the line serving food, and not all colored people had to work in the kitchen.
So what role do you think that white allies and musicians have to fight against racism in Iowa and in America?
Well, I think we need to talk about it. A lot of people don't even want to discuss it, and they don't want to admit that racism does still exist. Our educational institutions are a great help in this area, because I remember when I went to the University of Iowa, those were some of the happiest days of my life, even though there was a little discrimination there, but it wasn't like it was in Centerville. And I think the higher the education, and we know this is a fact, the higher the education, the less likely that someone is going to be prejudiced. It doesn't mean that everybody who has an education is going to be perfect, but we need to realize that the educational institution can make a great contribution. I think people within the community of a small town, whether it is Ankeny, Iowa, or Ottumwa, Iowa, or Centerville, Iowa, or Des Moines, Iowa, leaders need to get together and discuss this. I think ministers, all different faiths and churches, they need to get together and realize God is the creator of the universe, of everything, and of all of us. And we have to learn to love each other. Get rid of the fear of thinking, oh, this group is going to be better than this group. God wants us to love one another. That's why, as I stated earlier, we need to talk about it in all of the churches and synagogues and mosques and talk about love. And we need to realize that people should live together in neighborhoods. I think it's terrible today that we still have ghettos in this country. And I think people who are really blessed with wealth, they need to make contributions to help bring up the standard of living of people who are less fortunate, because everybody can't be a multimillionaire or a billionaire. But I think those of us who are blessed, I'm not a real rich person, but what I do have, I share. And I don't do that wanting somebody to pat me on the back and say, great job, Simon. No, I do it out of love. But if we don't communicate, if we don't talk about it, it's just absolutely not going to suddenly disappear.
Is there anything that you would like to add, Dr. Estes?
I would just say, let us try to love one another. Let us be kind. If someone hurts us, forgive. If they ask for forgiveness, then we must forgive. And help. Even if you have to go to somebody and give them $10 to buy food for a family, which wouldn't be very much, do it. We can all share. And those of us who are blessed, I really believe we have a responsibility to help other people. And go to the homes. I go sometimes to nursing homes and talk to those people. And I go there and I sing for them. And I don't charge them anything, because they're sitting there, they don't have family members. I've done that in various cities here in the United States. And in Iowa, I've gone to nursing homes, because those people need to have somebody come and talk to them. We are all put on this planet, as I said, to help one another, to love one another, to share with one another, to care, to be kind, and to be forgiving if someone makes a mistake. We could almost have heaven on earth. Let love have a chance. And love is kind and patient. So my suggestion to people, please love one another. Don't see skin color or nationality. See another human being who has needs that you also have, of food and education and shelter and clothing. These are basic needs that all of us have. So let's share all of that with one another.